Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. On this beautiful sunny afternoon, although it's probably about 72 or so. I apologize to the rest of the world who's inside of 7 feet of snow. Today's episode's about horoscopes, which I'm going to spell a very special way. What's this show going to be about? It's going to be about people who surrender their lives to arbitration. What does that mean? Well, would you get up in the morning, travel to a destination, and let people arbitrarily decide how well your day's going to go, how well your year's going to go, how you think about yourself, what you think your destiny is, what you think the circumstances in your life actually mean? I will not raise my hand. I control my life to the best of my ability. The only shit that happens to me that I can't control is the shit that happens to me that I can't control. The last thing I'm going to do is relegate myself to arbitration. And I think that's what horoscopes do. All methodologies, right? Numerology, astrology, tarot, and any other form of palm reading. But I'm going to split the atom here a little bit because I think it's important. Do I have fun at the end of a Chinese meal where the Americanized fortune cookie is handed out at the end? The little fortune inside and you get to break it open. Well, one, I'm excited because I really like the taste of fortune cookies. But two, sure, I'll play the game. I'll play the Santa Claus game. Pretend like this fortune cookie is somehow, linked to my life. There's something about fortune cookies that are actually pretty interesting because I think that most of them today, and since I've been alive probably, are all positive fortunes. And so if I can get a belief system going inside my mind that something positive is going to happen to me, that goes back to the law of attraction episode, right? And me deliberately picking the next second of my life through my attitude towards life, I can read a fortune cookie. It tells me something, riches are going to come. You're going to find a new job. Someone special in your life is coming back or being introduced or whatever. And then I start feeling that, right? It's like a placebo, a biorhythm, mental rhythms. I never paid much attention to this kind of stuff. When I was a kid, living in the Midwest, you got maybe a horoscope out of a newspaper or something, but there was no internet. We had a magic 8-ball at home, which was probably our closest thing to that. There was also Ouija boards and that kind of stuff, which I guess we should throw in there. But overall, it wasn't really something I had experienced on any deep level, and I certainly hadn't seen a deck of tarot cards in my lifetime. But I had a real interesting place where it shook out of me probably what the game is all about, and it was in the Prince movie, Under the Cherry Moon, where one of Prince's gigolo customers in the movie had given him a present, and the present was a deck of tarot cards. And he opens it up in front of another girl, and he looks at it, doesn't say much. And then he gets caught by the girl's mother and his gigolo client, who was a friend of the mother. She was an older woman. And the mother said, "Excuse me, do you read tarot?" And he said something like that. And to paraphrase him, he said, I don't really put much belief into this. I think you just tell people what they want to hear and they make it happen. Something like that. And at that point, it dawned on me that he's probably 100% correct. But what's the point of this video? The point of this video for me is that I think it can do you great harm as much as it can do good. People are typically drawn to these venues, these methodologies of determining what's going to happen to their life because they have lost track or never developed techniques to control their own life, despite their arrogance that they do. I have friends that if you talk to them, there's zero humiliation in anything that they say. Because perhaps they're a few years older than me, they talk from a standpoint of they know it all and I am merely the student. Constantly. It's bizarre. And I'm not sure they're aware that that's what they do. And then they rely 100% or 80% on these outside means to determine what's going to happen in their own life, which means they have no control over their future or their present. It's all determined by arbitration. It's riddled with tradition, right? Seems like, well, if this is a really old technique, and many of them are as old as the hills, numerology being one of them, then it must have survived through the times because it had some truth to it. Nah. How much tradition do we have in treating cancer with chemotherapy and radiation? And yet it kills 97% of the patients. The process of looking for the cancer kills you. Or the process of trying to kill it kills you, right? Tradition doesn't mean anything when it comes to this stuff. It doesn't. We believe in horoscopes based on your sign. The Chinese have a different thing they call the calendar, which is a 12-year increment of 12 creatures. Depending on when you're born, you're in the 12-year cycle of that creature. So in 12 years, people like you will be born. And of course, there's all of this kind of hocus-pocus mapping of who's compatible with who. Now, I have dabbled probably more inside the zodiac and the Chinese calendar than any of the astrology or numerology techniques or tarot. But we're going to slow down each one of the processes and analyze them for their validity in our lives. Now, the zodiac was not intended to ever be a methodology for predicting social compatibility. It was the symbols of the seasons of the year. It was to warn the farmer through analogous icons about if, this time of year you're supposed to do this and it's going to be this difficult or this easy. It has also been turned into the names of the epochs, right? The 12 epochs, right? We're in the epoch of the Pisces, moving into the age of Aquarius. I don't know what the Pope's going to do with his fucking fish hat. Now, there are seasons of the year, and when we are born, we then soon experience the season that's coming, right? So I was born in the tail end of summer, so the first thing I experienced in Germany was fall, and then winter. But I really started gaining my probably ability to crawl, ability to walk in the following summer. And so my biorhythms of the world are attached to when I was born and the seasons that I immediately experience. So I find it very interesting that the zodiac could be talking about and referencing through some interesting seasonal alignment and your bio alignment to either winter solstice or summer solstice, what kind of person that you are, where your instincts are. Are you a person that stays up late? A person that, gets up early every day? Well, in wintertime, the days are longer, right? The days are shorter, the night's longer. And so as a child, for the first probably easily 8 months of my life, I was in the dark for most of the day. Perhaps that influenced who I was as a person. But now, a lot of you have read your zodiac sign, and you will say to yourselves, oh my God, you are so that sign. All right. Well, I'm a Virgo, all right? Everything that you read about a Virgo, yeah, it's pretty much me. It's crazy. Although some people will have fringy, weird criticisms within all zodiac definitions, and they love to throw that one at you. Like the official definitions of each zodiac sign are usually very positive, and then some people read, some arbitrary thing on the side that, oh, did you know you're an asshole too? But if you think about the formation of the neural net in your brain based on the seasons you're about to incur, perhaps that plays a role. Perhaps exposure to the sun, perhaps the warmth or the cold makes your mind go into certain states of growth. And so based on when you were born within a 12-month cycle, it's more genetically connected to the actual mathematics of the world, and not so much wherever these people come up with the horoscope paragraphs every day. You ever wonder where that shit comes from? You ever wonder how they can come up with 365 different days of what's about to happen to your life? If the zodiac predictions, especially the daily predictions that come out of newspapers and what have you, if there was any validity to that, then everyone born on a particular day would have damn near the same exact life. Right? I assure you that's not the case. But I was born in Europe. And so, what about the kid who's born in Australia on the same day? The idea that me going into winter makes me a certain type of Virgo, but there's a Virgo born in Australia who's about to have the hottest summer they've ever had, let's say. That makes no sense, does it? There's no binding to the seasons because we have two hemispheres of the earth. Flatter around. Flatter globe, I should say. Disc or globe. I think people are excited when they find people that seem to really exude their zodiac prediction, the symbology prediction of what that kind of person would be. See, you are that person. Anytime they hear someone that is different than the zodiac prediction of what a particular sign would yield as a human being, they simply ignore it because it's no fun. But I'm going to throw you something about the zodiac that might be just a fun little thing to toy with in our brains, and it might end up exacerbating the problem that I'm trying to solve here. But, you know, if we are in a world that is created by a intelligent force, it might be that the personalities that are encapsulated within the definitions of the zodiac, since we seem to be experiencing a 12-month year, perhaps there's an intended balance of the types of human beings that exist to create a fabric, right? People pulling in different directions create tension, and it creates retention of a form. Perhaps humanity needs 12 different types of people constantly born throughout the year to hold it all together. The Chinese calendar is actually very interesting because it's going on a same increment of 12, but it's using it on a yearly basis, not a monthly basis. There's always this interesting thing that, like I've looked back at the zodiac in terms of what it says I'm compatible with in terms of signs, and it has been very interesting, the correlations there. But what ends up happening with that analysis is that you will say, they said something would go wrong or something would go right with a particular individual. Now, here's the thing. For everyone I haven't married, that I've dated and tried to marry, nothing went right? Or sorry, not nothing, but it didn't end up working out. And so in the end, there was no compatibility. So if I was checking off a list every sign that these people were, I'd probably get to the point where I doubt I've dated every sign, but, 8 of them out of 12 would be gone. I've dated 2 people who were the same sign, and man, were they ever polar opposites, right? Astrology. Let's talk about that. There seems to be an interesting correlation between those that rely on astrology and those who have no knowledge of astronomy. Now, for those who are contesting that we may not know what the bodies in space are, there's probably a whole separate episode on what that implication might mean. But if they are celestial bodies, as I've seen through a telescope in my buddy's backyards, and they're round and they have rings, and they really do exist out there, regardless of what they are, the notion is that the influence of the stars, the influence of the planets, the influence of the epoch that we're in, the alignment of all of this arbitrary mass in space somehow affects you, the tic-tac, on the surface of a planet. And the only thing that makes any sense there, on a scientific level, all right, would be the energy that it controls in your life. So you would have Saturn out there, right, which is so supposedly, who the fuck knows, supposedly so I would say sparse. It's not dense. It supposedly said it could float on the ocean. If you could build an ocean big enough, it would just float on the ocean surface. I mean, what a bunch of crap that is, but whatever. But if you go with my definitions throughout all my videos, go see Electrical Universe if you have any questions about how I believe the universe is held together. It's based on ethereal winds creating the illusion of light and energy, and it creates gravity through negative space, negative pockets of pressure in space. It's exerting very little energy on you whatsoever. And the notion is that supposedly, and this is what's interesting about a lot of the zodiac and all the horoscope stuff, the numerology, the astrology, all this stuff. It sort of negates any belief in a soul, right? You don't have any control over who you are. You are merely a vessel in an atheist world, and all of these forces on your body control, I guess, your glandular outputs, your neural net energy that determines how your neural peptides form your body, how your consciousness forms thoughts, right? That would have to be where you center the forces. Your body merely creates the illusion of a mind, an illusion of a consciousness, and therefore you are subjugated and relegated and constrained by these minute forces in space. But let's take a step back before we jump totally into this stuff. Where did this stuff come from? Why did it ever catch on? Why is there any tradition of it existing, right? I think one could easily say man was very uneducated about what was going on in the universe for the majority of man's existence on this planet. It's just the truth. We didn't know what the hell we were looking at. And that causes a lot of confusion, uncertainty. There's this concept of luck, which most people call opportunity. And if you don't get a lot of luck in your life, you don't win things arbitrarily in the universe, you tend to feel like you're in a darker gutter of the bowling alley of life, right? You're not that ball going right down the center at the center pin about to get a strike. There's people who are hypochondriacs, people that are just awkward, nervous all the time. And they start to believe that that's going to be their destiny. Because it's the feedback loop that they constantly believe that they're having affirmed in their mind. And they develop really bad habits, and retreating away from life, trying to avoid more failure, they simply become more introverted and more awkward. Sociopaths, psychopaths. And so when someone comes to them with a very certain voice, especially selling a service in most cases, and says, I can help you out. We will get you on the right track. You simply don't have any guidance, do you? And they say, no. My parents don't participate in my life. We're not a talky family, right? Everyone in our family is all into themselves. And as pop culture creates more and more selfishness, we're just introverted and introverted. Even if we're standing right next to another human being, we're thinking about our own gains more than we're thinking about taking care of other people, because empathy, again, is sort of this fluttering myth of the past. What's empathy? Oh, that stuff never really existed. But it used to exist in abundance. But when life gets hard, empathy goes out the door right away, because it becomes survival. You talk to prisoners in prisons, and there's no empathy, because they don't believe they can maintain empathy and survive. And so it becomes a barbaric survival of the fittest, law of the jungle. So here comes someone with the methodology. They point at the sun, they show you a zodiac wheel, and they tell you this very comforting story that they can work it all out for you. And in the law of attraction, to someone who is ignorant of how the world works, of how the universe works, especially way back in the day, there's very little excuse to be that kind of way today in a Western world, right? You could find people in the jungle, find people in rainforests that would still need this sort of guidance. But it was a methodology to satiate the ignorant. Not the stupid, but the ignorant, right? There are placebo pills out there that do the job because people simply need to believe that something is going to help them. There are these doctors that do the fake surgeries in third world countries, and they, pulling chicken bones out of someone's gut, and they've all concealed it through sleight of hand. But some of these people actually recover because what they were suffering from wasn't terminal to begin with, and all they needed to do is put the biofeedback into their lives that they are going to be healed. People have regrown, like I said in the Holographic Universe episode, they've grown back entire hip joints with cartilage and the upper part of their femurs simply by believing that the healing waters of a hot spring could do such a thing. And quite frankly, there might be a biofrequency of healing, which I'm going to get to, which I think is very real, that can do that. The Egyptians talked about doing that. They resonate your body with the frequency of healing you in whatever capacity you're suffering from, and you get better. And the biology there is it simply shakes apart the invaders in your body, getting rid of all the bacteria that's infiltrated your body, perhaps pulverizing an RNA virus that's giving you the flu, giving you some sort of terminal illness. It could be that when you encompass yourself in water, like I always say, it calms you down. There's nothing you can do about it. Hell, even a turbulent ocean will calm you down. But a lake, a bath, whether it be natural or your bathroom, can do wonders for your personality, right? I believe there's more of a biological connection with frequencies. And if you study the piezo effect on crystals and think about the fact that your body is a collection of microscopic crystals that build up your proteins, there's a lot of solid connections there. Putting crystals in your home to filter the chaotic frequencies of the universe, which are now in our world, in the billions of frequencies per second, it filters them back down to potentially healthy frequencies. Or if nothing else, inert, benign frequencies that don't cause any damage in your DNA. I find that I have never found anyone who studies astrology and believes astrology is affecting their life in a productive manner having a deep cosmology astronomy background. I've never found the two in the same person. Perhaps they're out there, I'm sure they are, but I have not been able to ask a question about how the universe works and have them answer it back in any level of detail. And again, there's a big dispute about all the information we have from lying space agencies. I'll grant you that. But regardless of what you believe, you have to have some model of the universe if you believe the universe is affecting your life on especially a destiny manner, right? The real thing you want to do at the beginning of this episode is to say, how much do I rely on this kind of stuff in my life? I think a mere fraction of society actually reads this stuff and changes their day accordingly. I say you can write your own horoscope if you want. That's what you should do. That's what I do. It's going to be a good day. I don't know how it's going to be a good day, but it's going to be a good day. I'm just going to make it that way. I'm going to be relaxed today. I'm going to be patient today. And even if you slip up, at least that's your goal. What's the difference between hearing it from someone else and slipping up and hearing it from yourself and slipping up? Not much, right? Tarot cards. It's a very interesting, super detailed, probably more detailed than anything I've ever heard, besides numerology, which I think is very interesting. What is the session? You sit down with someone who has these tarot cards, each card representing sort of a positive, negative spin, depending on its orientation when drawn. There's a deck of them. You shuffle them. The person who is drawing them out from you is suggesting to you that your destiny is determining which card is flipped up first, second, third, fourth, and that their orientation in the pile is the difference between a card of life and a card of death within the same card. A card of fortune, a card of demise. Someone who wants you as a customer knows sort of what you need to hear. You're definitely going to want at least 4 parts good if there's a 1/5 part caution. It was a very interesting experiment that was done. And I forgot the guy's name, but the guy that used to run, I think he still runs it, the Skeptic Society out of San Francisco. He's this bearded old guy. He's probably on his last leg here. But he ran it for, 40 years or whatever, if not more. He's the guy that helped Johnny Carson cracked some of these fakery dudes. I forgot the famous guy, but they got in a lawsuit together. There's a great documentary on Netflix about this old man. But he tells a story about a friend of his who was a professor at Harvard who used to read tarot cards to his students throughout the week. And he must have had 4 or 5 people that relied on him for this. He tells his buddy, he goes, "You don't really believe this shit, do you?" His buddy said, "Oh, yeah, I do. I used to think it was crazy until I started reading for other people. And then these people told me, hey, this really makes a difference in my life. You're really helping me out. I don't know what I would do without you." And so his buddy, the skeptics guy, goes up to his buddy and he says, "Do me a favor." He says, "For the next 7 days, when you start your new sessions, I want you to tell them the exact opposite of everything that the card says." And the guy said, "No way. No way will I do that. This is a science. I don't know how it works, but it works." And people were reporting, and he says, "Please, do me a favor. Tell them the opposite. And then next week you can tell them what you did, and you can blame me for it." And I guess through some wrangling of the argument, he agreed to do this. And every single card that was laid down, he read the opposite meaning of it to his people, and he is sweating, and he is feeling horrible. He even called his buddy up in the middle of the week and said, "I don't know if I can continue. I really feel like I'm destroying these people's lives and potentially sending them off for really risky endeavors." And he said, "Please stick with it. Either you're going to prove me wrong, or we're both going to learn something here." Well, the next week comes around, and the students start telling him that the reading the last week was more accurate than any of the readings that he'd ever given them, ever. And he never read again. He called up his buddy and said, "You know what? You're right. This is all bullshit. Here I am thinking I'm destroying these people's lives, and they think that I am telling them, I've told them the very, very best eventuality they could possibly have." For me, that was pretty good. That was a pretty good sign and a real ballsy thing for that guy to do. For those who believe in tarot cards, I think we owe him a debt of gratitude. Numerology. Well, numerology goes back to what I think a lot of people are figuring out about physics, especially quantum physics, is that you can make math say anything that you want it to say. You just need to know what it is you're trying to say. Now, if any of you have looked at those equations on blackboards back in Einstein's day, what's really fascinating about it is that you don't have any memories probably of Tesla having those formulas on the board, at least the big, gigantic, ridiculous formulas. You still did lots of calculations for circuitry to figure out how to move electrons, restrict them, and resist them, and augment them through coiling them, right? Let me give you a crash course on how the big, ugly formulas work. They create what's called a variable, and that is when you see either a Greek symbol or you see a letter, an alphanumeric letter, alphabetic letter, written on the board to represent a particular group of attributes about the universe. And they simply start toying with quantities of that particular variable. It could be a velocity variable, meaning its speed and direction. It could be speed. It could be a vector, which is simply the direction. And obviously, in a lot of predictive models for aspects of the universe that we understand, it works beautifully. If it didn't work beautifully, then we wouldn't be able to have, C.G. Tarkins in Rogue One, because mathematics made that person exist from nothing. It's really phenomenal. If you haven't seen Rogue One, the reason to see it is to see the animated Tarkin in that movie, and then of course the Princess Leia, the young Princess Leia at the end of the film. It's just really the first step into super duper photoreal human beings. Tron 2 attempted it with Jeff Bridges, but I think they did a better job with Bruce Boxleiter playing Tron in the same film. But when it comes to theoretical physics or theoretical quantum physics, you're talking about things that don't have to create C.G. Tarkins anymore. They merely predict the out-of-sight, out-of-mind formations of mass and energy Either they are talking about macro events that exist so far out in the universe that we can't confirm anything that they say, or they're at such a subatomic assertion level of what's actually happening way, way down at the quark level or even below that there's no machines that can observe what they're saying. But they'll convince you that they can because they'll start observing things, in between those two areas. But there is a catch with this. When, was it Galileo, right? He supposedly gets up on the Tower of Pisa and drops two iron balls, and one of them's small and one of them's big, and he drops them at the same time, and he says they hit the ground at the same time. Now we know that it's actually not quite hitting the ground at the same exact time, but it's close enough, right? There's a bunch of math that will predict pretty accurately that event occurring. But what they attempt to do is use mathematics to predict why it's occurring. And that's the crux of the problem. That's where it becomes a subjective analysis instead of an objective, which means without a bias. Subjective is pure bias. Now, if you're a scientist, you'll know that you have to assert biases, right? If you don't dabble in biases, you won't find the objective causes because you must experiment to see if your prediction models hold up over time. But let me give you an example with Galileo's experiment. Someone could theorize on paper that angels push things to the surface of the earth, and they could write an A in a formula and say that's the angel. And when there's a bigger object to push down, there's a bigger angel with more strength that pushes it down, and there's a smaller angel for the smaller object, or there's two angels for one and one angel for the other one. And they can completely create an algorithm on a whiteboard that looks all sophisticated and complicated, and it'll work out 100%. They will simply be predicting how many angels it takes to push down something that falls. How many angels have to lift an airplane into the sky, and how many angels have to hold on to it while it's up there, flying along with the plane. And when you say, well, I don't see any angels, or I don't understand what you're talking about, they'll simply go, well, they're invisible. Angels are invisible because, if they were here, you might want to ask them a question. If you distract them, the plane will fall out of the sky and kill everybody. Well, what's the difference in that theory and the current I have no fucking idea what gravity is theory in Wikipedia that says it's a phenomenon? What's the difference? But what is the force, the mental force that is trying to get at the cause, right? What's making you want to know in the first place? It's your curiosity, right? It's because when you don't have a comforting place for the unknown in your system, then you have an uncomfortable place in your chest for that unknown. And so we welcome anyone or anything that has a methodology that can explain it. And that is the allure that we must be very careful with. Now, if you read a horoscope like me, you're having fun, just like a fortune cookie, right? And what I do when I read a horoscope, which is probably once every 3 to 5 years, I will simply kind of laugh and go, here I go. I'm reading a fortune cookie, and I read it. If it starts going negative, I stop reading it because it's not doing me any favors, right? But if it remains a positive horoscope, and again, there's some newspapers that understand that that's probably the most alluring formula, I just sort of play games with it. I just kind of let it infect me from a law of attraction standpoint. But all I'm doing is I'm using what is tantamount to a painting on the wall to make me feel good. We typically put art on our wall because it speaks to us, right? Now, some people put dark stuff on the wall because whatever reason, that's the kind of macabre, alternate emotional spectrum that perhaps they don't have access to unless they inject it in their lives. Some of us think that life itself provides plenty of macabre moments, and it's up to us to get through it, Like the wise fictional character Samson said in Carnival, which had tarot cards, he said, dying's the easy part, folks. Living's the hard part. We have people that claim to be psychic. People who are very famous for claiming to be psychic. People who were, famous doing something else, like being an actor or something, that turn into psychics and say that they've always been psychic. Now, I think psychic abilities are actually makes more sense to me than any of this arbitrary mathematical model stuff, right? Because you are a human being. You have, regardless if you like it or not, the glandular systems that make up your chakras, right? You do. And so if you are merely in tune with the frequencies that you feel, and through some weird group of mistakes or intentional situations, you're able to recognize and attach feelings to certain outcomes, then perhaps you can listen to your fellow man and figure shit out. I'm going to repeat myself. Well, I don't want you to think I have Alzheimer's. I always kind of call it out that I know I'm repeating myself. But I have a story that I've told in an episode a long time ago about a friend of mine that had his hair cut by a woman that saw auras. And I've heard people talk about, seeing auras, but when the aura seeing only seems to happen when no one's there, I think they're full of shit and trying to get attention, right? People who see auras see them. They see them all the time. But this woman saw them all the time, apparently. And my buddy was going to dinner. This is how the short version of the story goes. He was going to dinner. His fiancée of 7 years dumps him on the way to dinner. He literally, I think, drops her off on the side of the road because she wanted to get a cab to go home because it just was an awkward situation. She kind of pre-planned this whole thing. And so he's destroyed. I mean, he's a young guy. He's probably about 23 years old, and he is just devastated. And so he drives to his friend's house where this woman actually roommates. That's how he met her, and that's how she's cutting his hair. And he's surprising his friend who's taking a nap. And so he comes in, he knocks on the door. His buddy's like, he's like, okay, man, well, let me just put my clothes on and we'll hang out. So he's waiting in the hallway of this big home in Westlake, California. And he hears this gasp, this blood-curdling gasp at the other end of the hallway. And he said it freaked him out. And he looks over, and it's this woman who lives all the way down the hallway, coming out of her bedroom, just going to the kitchen or something, or the bathroom. And she looks at him. She says, "Brian, what is wrong?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Your aura is horrible. You are in tremendous pain. What is going on? Tell me." And there's no necessary correlation between her seeing auras and having the therapy that he needed, but perhaps in seeing auras, she's dealt with a lot of bad experiences, and perhaps she does have the skills to help him. But it freaked him out so bad that he went outside and waited for his friend, and he said he never walked inside the house again. He never got his hair cut by her again because it was just too disturbing. Now, I know this guy, at least back in the day when I knew him really, really well, and I believe him. So I do believe people can see auras. I think that might have a lot more connection with reality than, again, arbitrary stuff. But again, as the old joke goes, if you are truly psychic, then your life should be pretty damn amazing, shouldn't it? You would never be conned by anyone else, which means you could arbitrarily invest in the universe and you would always be right as long as you listen to yourself. Psychically speaking, there's a bunch of different definitions to this, of course. There's psychic ability to see what's going on in a person's soul right in front of you, which makes more sense to me, like, again, the aura seeking. And then there's psychics that say they know the future or potential futures, right? Well, you could invest in futures if you could see the future, right? You would know what crop's going to do really well this year. You know what stock is going to go up, what stock's going to go down. You could just have a feeling. If it's a big moment in time that a company's going to do well, then it would be millions of people being jovial that they own that stock, and that frequency should come to you if you can feel it. Never happens, does it? A lot of psychics have been caught lying with earpieces in their ears, being fed information. Preachers do it all the time. There have been psychics that will talk to people in their later years, and they'll immediately go for lowbrow shit like, "Oh, I see you having prostate problems." All these health conditions that happen to you when you're older, and so they're just reaching, right? People have suckered psychics by saying, their parents have died, and what are their parents telling them now? And they'll make up this huge story, and then the guy says, well, my parents are still alive. You should have known I was lying if you're psychic. I also mentioned John Edwards. He's the guy that had his show on TV for a little while. He had like a little town hall meeting format. There were several people that I've had a friend of mine go on the show. As a matter of fact, they said they filmed all day, and he's making hundreds of predictions and hundreds of insights in one show, and 70% of them are cut out because they're wrong. And so you start thinking, well, 30% of the time you could guess and be right. It's actually around 21%, to be honest, but that's what randomness can yield you. But he had some people on the show that hated being on the show because their spouse brought them to the show, and by the time he was done with them, they were sobbing at the details he was able to recall about very tough experiences in their lives, right? Again, could be pure arbitration, but I've seen a few of his stories hit, half a dozen really detailed things that you just think, Jesus, how could this guy come up with such incredible details and be right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it seems to me that some people might be psychic, and when they try to turn it into a business, it's simply they don't have the energy to really do it on a regimented basis. They have to build up energy to get the insight. So who knows, right? I don't know anyone who claims to be psychic personally, because I believe that there's an infinite I believe that there's an infinite flavor of seconds in front of you, right? All the bad seconds are in front of you, all the good seconds are in front of you, and all the neutral seconds are in front of you. And so you choose which one you go into. And so it's problematic if you let someone focus on one of the three, and perhaps, you need either to learn a lesson and go through some hardships. So you need those negative seconds to teach you a lesson, or you've had enough of those negative seconds and you really need the positive ones as a form of relief to your system. Who knows, right? The regiment that concerns me the most that I see in some of my friends is a person who wakes up in the morning and leaps into these paradigms. And what's really odd is I used to think that someone was either a tarot card person, an astrology person, or a numerology person. But today I see a single person going into all those regiments at the same exact time when they absolutely have no claim to draw from the same causality in the universe, right? So it's almost a contradiction in purpose to go into several different, regiments of how you would predict what's going to happen in your life. I want you to own your life, right? And because no one has ever told you that you can, you tend not to believe that that's possible, right? As I said in my existential episode, what if the biggest secret in the universe is that you control it? And we know that our educational system's written by those who run the world, and they write our textbooks, they determine what children's books get published, what scientific books get published, and so they're constantly teaching you're an infinite nothing in the universe, and that you're simply being beat up in the pinball machine. When you're actually Magneto, and you can take that pinball and you can say, I decide to hit a bumper, I decide to hit a flipper, a kicker, whatever. I want to be in that hole right there, I think I can promise you with my own life experience that my attitude towards life and my ignorance of being able to control it, or my ignorance that I can control it, okay, has yielded all of the great things in my life and all the negative things in my life. It has. For instance, when I was a kid, I was blessed to have sort of the 80s version of a Norman Rockwell painting as an upbringing. And I had my own thing. My parents got divorced and they were involved in their own lives. But for me, that was a blessing. That made me very independent. That made me an entrepreneur very young. Hell, even when my parents were together, I was an entrepreneur as a kid. So I just got the bug up my butt to take control of my life. When I came to California as almost an 18-year-old kid, I was euphoric about the place I was at. I was in love with beaches, palm trees, everything that was around me. And so it took a really long time for me to get cynical at all about my life. And when I moved to the Bay Area, it was a really tough dog-eat-dog place, very different than Southern California, where everyone was networking together and trying to help each other, and where all the neighbors knew each other. And it was sort of like the epitome of the 80s, when I first got here. And then as the 90s came around, what happens? We have super dark music. I'm not saying it's bad, but really dark, angry shit. And that started to infect me as a person. Even though my career blew up as being in Silicon Valley for 12 years, the social payment that was due was absolute. And so when I was surrounded by negativity and this lack of camaraderie, it was just interesting how everybody up there thought that, hey, we're superior to Southern California. I'm thinking, Jesus, you don't even know your fucking neighbor's first and last name, for Christ's sake. You might say hi every day. I had a neighbor where we would wash our cars at the same time. We'd have full-blown conversations while washing the car, and I never knew that guy's name. I never was invited over for dinner. When I invited, they didn't want to come, or they'd say they would, and then they would come up with an excuse why they can't. And so I became a little jaded, and so did my life path. And when I moved back down to Southern California, oh my God, all my dreams blew up again. 100%. I started to reclaim who I was as a human being, but it still took years to shake that other stuff off. But let me break it down for you even further, okay? Now, granted that when you live your life, if someone said, what's your favorite ice cream? And you say vanilla. And I go, here's the best vanilla in the world. I mean, it's the best. And you take a bite and you're like, oh my God, you're so right. This is the best vanilla in the world. And I said, would you be okay with eating this every single day? And first you're like, hell yeah, Jesus. And I say, man, there's no fat. There's no sugar that's going to hurt you. You'll never get obese. You'll never gain a pound from eating this. So you're like, oh my God, yeah. Eventually, your taste buds will get utterly bored of that flavor, right? And after maybe 2 or 3 years, if you can even make it that long, if you ever eat vanilla ice cream again, it'll be a miracle. Because it's been squashed out of your pattern recognition as a positive new frequency, a rare thing. Desserts are usually supposed to be rare things. So, let me ask you this. If it's stability that you want, then you can pick a regiment and keep it in your life as often as you can. If it's variety that you want, okay, you vary at a certain amount. You don't get tired of everything at the same time, right? Would you want anyone to put a thought into your mind that's negative? Ever? Would you want anyone to put a thought in your mind that creates doubt as to your capabilities? Ever? I'm going to say no to both those, right? I wouldn't let anybody do that to me. And it doesn't mean, there's a distinction, it doesn't mean that someone doesn't come up to you and caution you, but still believe in you, My parents and all my loved ones in the Midwest, when they heard about me moving to California, no one had done it in my family, so they were freaked out, man. And they were giving me as much caution as possible, but at the same exact time, 99% of them said, if anybody can do it, you can do it. So just be careful, keep your eyes open, be careful with who you trust, and go for it. And then I got blessed beyond measure with the people that I ended up working with and for when I moved here. I mean, for the first 4 years I was in California, I worked in dream teams with amazing people. And I found some dream teams up in the Bay Area for sure, but it took a long time for me to resonate to their frequency to kind of see, okay, this is how this works. It's a lot different than where I was from. It's culture shock, I want you to build your life out of your intent. I've got friends of mine who rely on this stuff, this horoscope stuff, and these outside means, and they hate their lives. And I'm trying to press upon them, look, knock this shit off where you're letting other people tell you how your life is. It's not their life to tell you anything about your life. It's your life. And quite frankly, instead of letting go of an apparatus or a methodology that you believe you might suffer the slings and arrows if you do, I want you to think the complete opposite, right? I want you to think, again, like I always say on this show, pardon the French, fuck that shit. I control my life. And whoever made me, you don't need to exactly know exactly who made you, but I guarantee you one of the greatest gifts that they have given you is the ability to control your own destiny. And some people think, well, man, I'm injured, I'm sick, or I'm stuck in life in this particular way, and absolutely nothing could change this. It's so massive, and the pressure on me and the inertia that seems to be around me, it's like trying to swim in, crude oil or something. There's no way, Well, if you keep that attitude, that'll be the eventuality, and it's almost as if no creativity entered your life to get out of that situation. But let me tell you, as I said in the Law of Attraction episode, miracles, by man's definition, happen every single day, and they can rip you out of that world that you're in that you don't want to have anything to do with, to the extent that you will look back a year later and you will go, if anyone told me this was going to be where I am today, I would argue with them that they're wrong, that I am stuck in this bad place. But I'm here to tell you 100,000% that that's completely wrong. You can merely draw to yourself these opportunities that you couldn't imagine. And you know what? Just simply thinking like that and saying, you know what? I listened to this weird guy on YouTube and he said this was possible. I'm still arguing with him in my own mind that it's not possible. But you know what? I'm going to give him a chance. And every single day I wake up, I'm going to inundate myself with visions of myself exactly where I want to be in life. And it doesn't have to be specific. You don't have to say, well, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and I want to envision myself in Malibu, California, owning a beach house. You can do that if you want, and that won't hurt you at all. But what you might do is reduce the emotion down to a theme. My life's going to be awesome, or my life is awesome, and I just haven't recognized it yet. A lot of relationships that go bad, what do we find out the second that we walk away from a relationship? For the grass is greener bullshit, right? We immediately find out that where we were was just as bright and just as plentiful and nourishing to our soul, and we regret throwing away people in our lives, so whether it be a friend or a partner in life. And we simply got complacent. Maybe we got tired. Maybe we overworked ourselves. And so there was chemical reasons why we started getting tired. It's why, I'm going to throw a little caveat in here, a little digression, but I will always preach to you that, keeping your weight under control in your life is very important. Because weight itself, who cares what people think about being fat or something like that? It's not about that. It's not about someone judging you. But what ends up happening is as you gain weight, you become more tired because you're carrying around more mass. If you get heavy, you need to understand you get heavy on the outside of your body, but you also get heavy on the inside of your body. Those fat cells that are gaining more and more fat and linking sugar inside fat cells, it stops your organs from working properly. It makes your breathing struggle. And if you don't get enough breath, why do you think you yawn? You yawn because you need more oxygen. There's two ways that happens. You're waking up and you're trying to get your body to pound out a big breath while you're awake, or you're in a conference room with a bunch of people. It's right after lunch. Lunch has upped your temperature, right? A couple degrees, and so you're warm inside processing all this food, and everyone's sucking oxygen out of the room with all the doors closed. And so you start yawning in the middle of a meeting or something. Well, that's if you're completely healthy. Imagine you put another 20, 30, 40, 80 pounds on your body. It's very, very tough. And yes, there's exceptions to the rule, right? There's that guy that's 80 pounds overweight and he's, You wouldn't know, because somehow his body is able to convert the energy all day long, and so he gets up at crack of dawn, has a great productive day, and goes to sleep, and just puts his head on the pillow, and boom, he's out. I envy those people, but I don't think we can roll the dice and assume that we've got those genetics. So just a little caveat there. You have to take care of your vessel, take care of your temple. It is your only temple you're going to get, right? Until folks start developing head transplant, surgeries. But I'm going to spell this like whore, with a W-H, right? You guys already know that because you've seen the title on this thing. The reason why I'm doing that, I wrote a poem a long time ago, Horoscope Whore, because I had a girlfriend a long time ago that just lived off this shit, and it just drove me nuts. Like, we couldn't begin our day without the arbitrary intake of total horseshit. And even though I didn't have the thought process I had today, it just didn't make sense to me. Don't be a whore to anyone, people. To anyone or anything. If you want to attach an addiction, for instance, to something bad that you can use as a framework to fight an addiction, I want you to think of... I debate giving you a very graphic example, but let's just say there's a big person in the room, big person, an Andre the Giant kind of person with good knees, and that person routinely throughout the day grabs you physically and forces you to do something, insert whatever you want, forces you to do something that you are repulsed by. And you have no control because they're a lot bigger than you, and they're forcing you to do it. Well, if I tell you that as a story, especially, you're thinking of yourself fighting back, right? Well, that's what any addiction really is. It's the big thing in the room that controls you. It's alcohol, it's drugs, it's porn, it's whatever the hell it is. Video games. If something controls you, I want you to externalize the symbology of what that is and attach it to someone forcing you to do something. And hell, if you really want to split hairs, the first few times that they force you to do it, you like it. It's cool. But then you don't have a choice anymore. Again, I talked about this in the last episode, but Robert Downey Jr. talked about smoking heroin, and he said that I wasn't able to deal with my addiction until I was acknowledging the fact that I had an addiction, and that it was this thing that was outside me that was controlling me, and that I was never going to get the satisfaction from smoking heroin ever again, like I did the very first time I did it. And once I realized that it could never be attained, it was like free. It was easy to get away from it. Look what this guy's done to his career since then, right? I want you to map arbitrary systems of telling you what to do with your life and how it's going to turn out to bullshit. If anything, do an experiment for me. If you still think I'm full of shit, fine. Do an experiment like the guy in Harvard that read the cards backwards. Don't read the cards backwards to yourself. Just cease doing that and listen to your own mind, because to the degree you've whored yourself out to this stuff is to the degree you haven't heard your inner voice. No matter how much you bullshit yourself about how you're hearing it, the second you reach out for advice like that is the second you relinquish complete control of yourself. I'm willing to bet that you can tell yourself a much better future that is much more aligned with who you are as a human being than any arbitrary system or person could ever tell you. Even a psychic who sits down in front of you, an aura seeker that can see it, right? And they say, I see that you feel like this. Well, let's just have a random conversation about what you really want in life. If you're still relying on someone else coming up with your vision of the world, articulating what you want in the world, then you don't have control of your life still. No matter how accurate they are at seeing your current state, predicting your past, or whatever, right? John Edwards never walked up and told anyone to do anything with their life. He just said, I'm talking to your dead loved ones, blah, blah, blah. You still have to control your life, right? I think you feel me. I'm not going to go on any further. I've been wanting to make this episode for quite a while. I just need to get my notes together in my brain. Anyway, deepthoughtsradio.com for all the feeds. There's video if you're on audio. There's audio if you're on video. So you want to be in your car, listen to this kind of stuff. It might help a little road rage, hopefully. Enjoy your life. Predict your life. You are the expert on what you want. You really are. Even if you find yourself saying, I have no idea what I want to do with my life, and it's not really true. Get in there. Listen to yourself. Listen to the themes of what you like. Don't worry about whether or not you want to be a mechanic or a pilot. Fuck that. That's really specific. Just say, do you want to fly? Do you want to use your mind? Do you want to solve problems? Do you want to help other people? Do you want to do all the above? Something completely different? That's what you should go seek out. And don't worry if your life right this very second isn't exactly the way you want it. You got time to experiment, right? As long as you're alive, you're winning, right? When you wake up and you're alive, you're winning. It doesn't matter the shape of your body. Doesn't matter where the world is. You can affect change on yourself. And it's just like when you lose weight. The really, really heavy people that are 100 pounds overweight, they have the capability of losing 25 pounds in a month. But if you're just 5 pounds overweight or 10 pounds overweight, you know that that's a 6-month struggle to get those extra pounds down. But get in there and design your life. Enjoy it. Life is the best multiplayer, massive multiplayer online video game you've ever played in your life, right? You can dig yourself out of anything. That's all I'm going to say. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.